Everyone has to live somewhere, and everyone has to invest their money someplace. So what happens when where you live meets up with where your money is invested? Hello, real estate. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Big Money Real Estate. I'm Elise Glink. Here's your daily update. So I've had Dan Goldstein on with me a couple of times already to talk about his reporting for Market Watch. He's their real estate reporter, and he's back today to fill me in on his report on the 4 hidden home hazards. And you can find a link to that story directly below this video. Now, I know this story is particularly meaningful to him because he spent 10 years as a volunteer firefighter and EMT, so he's seen some of these things cause huge problems firsthand, and always wants to spread the word to as many homeowners and investors as possible about the risks, financial and personal, involved with each one. Hey, Dan, thanks for coming back to Big Money Real Estate.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
So your first thing that you want to warn people about, excuse me, losing my voice after the weekend, is having the wrong smoke detectors. And what do you mean by that exactly? I didn't actually even know there were different kinds of smoke detectors.
Well, and this is a big issue. There are two primarily ones, ionization alarms and photoelectric, and they work very differently. Ionization alarms you will generally see in your kitchen, and they work with a little tiny bit of a radioactive substance that it can actually pick up fast-moving, big-burning particles. The problem with the ionization alarms, and they are in about 90% of everybody's home. We have about 100 million ionization detectors, and I'm not saying they don't do a good job, but the problem with the ionization alarms, and they are in your homes pretty much everywhere, they don't do a good job of combating what most people consider are the smoldering fires. These are for fast-moving fires. These are for fires that are in your kitchen, grease fires, fires that produce a lot of heat, a lot of smoke. The ones that kill people are smoldering fires, and they tend to occur in the bedroom, and that's where you want a photoelectric smoke detector because they are simply better at handling and alarming sooner than the ionization alarms. In fact, there's been tests done, a lot of firefighters have done tests, that sometimes the photoelectric alarms will sound 20 to even 30 minutes before an ionization alarm will pick up these little tiny burning particles. And unfortunately, the fire isn't going to kill you, but it's the asphyxiation that's going to kill you. You may simply die from carbon monoxide poisoning before you even burned in a fire.
You know, for investors, I think, you know, as long as your smoke detector is working, you're not necessarily thinking about it. One of the things that we do for our rental units is on the anniversary date, we put in brand new batteries, check all the smoke detectors right before somebody moves in, a new renter moves in. And then on the anniversary date, we hand over a package of batteries so that they can replace all of them all over again, so that every year you're getting the brand new smoke detectors. Because of course, if your smoke detector doesn't even have a battery that works, it doesn't matter whether it's photoelectric or ionized, right? It's just not going to work.
Right, and there's two things there. Is not only do you want to, obviously, we talk about this all the time, is change your clocks, change your battery, but you should also change your smoke detectors every 5 to 10 years anyway.
Yes.
And if you haven't changed your smoke detector in the last 5 years, you should go out and get photoelectric smoke detectors, especially for your bedrooms. Anywhere you're expecting a slow-moving, smoldering fire, maybe from a cigarette that's been laying in bed or a couch. These are the fires that are going to kill you faster than a fast-moving grease fire that you're going to find in the kitchen. And on that same topic, Elise, it's really important that if you are buying new construction or you are renovating a house, if you can and you're willing to pay the money or your contractor is willing to do it, is to hardwire these smoke detectors. And what that means is that if one of them sounds, they'll all sound. And what that also helps do is you have AC power backup. So you're not relying on just the battery, because in almost all the fires where firefighters have encountered deaths or injuries, they've usually found a case where the where the smoke detector was in the house, but it had a dead battery and there was no AC power backup.
I love that suggestion. We found out this year that every 5 years you have to replace them. I'm not even sure. One of them, we kept putting in a new battery, and the years go by. When you're renting out an apartment, you're not living there, or a house, the years just kind of go by, right? Somebody takes a 2-year, 3-year lease, and before you know it, you're at 5 or 7 years, and you may not have replaced that smoke detector. And it's such a great reminder. Of course, there was that terrible, you always every year hear of horrible things like, I think it was in Brooklyn, where that Orthodox Jewish family lost like 8 of their 9 children. And the wife died as well because they didn't even have a smoke detector up in the bedroom on the second floor where the kids were. So you just hear those kinds of stories and your heart breaks because it's just so unnecessary.
Yeah, there's even worse. The worst was actually a fire chief who died because his house was not equipped with the proper smoke detectors. He actually asphyxiated in his on his couch because of a slow moving fire. And typically, what happens is again, you won't be burned, but you'll simply go to sleep. And even if you wake up, you're going to be disoriented and you're not be able to find your way out. So
Right.
that's why these photoelectric smoke detectors are so much better in the bedrooms, in the hallways, areas where you can have these smoldering fires rather than the fast moving fires that an ionization alarm is designed to detect.
Right. Well, let's quickly go through the other 4 hidden hazards. And I know you have more information on your Market Watch story. And again, if you're just watching this now, you can find the link for that story below the video. You've got hidden or unsafe gas lines, the ones that were used for lighting between 1860 and 1915. Okay, it's now 100 years later. How are you supposed to find those?
Well, it's very interesting because a lot of these homes are still in existence. In fact, just according to our data, and we ran some numbers, is that Chicago actually has some of the houses, the most amount of houses that were built between 1860 and 1915. New Jersey comes second, and New York comes third.
But do you know why that is? Wait, just a little bit of Chicago history from the Chicago,
There you go.
history
Yep, there
buff.
you go.
So when we had the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, it destroyed most of the city. And what ended up happening, because we were gunning for the World's Fair in 1891. And so between 1872 and 1891, when the World's Fair was held, they rebuilt the entire city of Chicago. And because so much of it had gone up in smoke, rebuilt it with brick became the standard, stone became the standard, and out went all of the, basically the wood houses that had been built from prairie wood that basically went up in flames, like the minute that O'Leary's cow kicked over the bucket, or whatever you happen to believe. So that's why there was so much building that went on in Chicago. But so many places around the country had these kinds of things that were buried. The gas lines, when everything went in, it was turn of the century where you started to have gas lines get moved into the residential neighborhoods. How do you find those?
Well, and this is really one of the things what you want to do very carefully is obviously if you're doing renovation and you're doing some contracting, if you come across some cast iron pipes, it's very important that you make sure that whatever gas connection is shut off before you open them. Because actually, I ran into a person who was renovating a home down in Southern Maryland, and he was removing a chandelier fixture, and he actually opened the pipe and he said, "Hey, I smell gas," and he screwed it right back up. And these are things that actually happen. These gas lines can actually still exist in your home. And like I said, they're very likely between 1860 and 1915, 1920, because obviously in the 1920s, we started having widespread electrification in houses, but they still can be there. So it's very careful that you want to check this and not just go drilling into walls willy-nilly without checking, making sure what's behind there, and obviously shutting off the gas if you are planning to do any kind of work behind the walls where you don't know what's behind that wall.
Oh yeah, no, completely agree. Our house, the main part of our house was built in the 1880s, and it had knob and tube wiring, it had all kinds of stuff that went into it. We even had an old boarded up coal room in the basement where the coal was dumped in from the outside, and then people would go in and sort of throw it into the stove. But anyway, okay, third point, you are warning people about lightweight wood truss construction, that being a fire hazard. Tell us what that looks like.
Well, this is something that most contractors know, and certainly it is the bane of the fire service, is lightweight truss construction. And that basically, instead of having a solid wood beam, a 2x6 or a 4x6, you have a truss. And these trusses are very common. They're very lightweight. They're very strong. And about 60% of all new construction in this country uses some form of lightweight truss. The problem with the lightweight trusses is as follows. It's not actually nailed together. It's actually pressed together. It's got gussets on either side. And these gussets are simply pressed into the wood. Now, they're very strong, but when they are potentially, when there's a fire impingement, they actually can pop off. And according to the U.S. Fire Administration, about more than a dozen firefighters have lost their life since 2000 because of these lightweight trusses. There's simply no way to tell when they're going to give way. And this is actually important for contractors and homeowners to understand, is because if your house is involved in a fire and it's been burning for an hour, there's a good chance your firefighters are not going to go in to save your property. They may just have to let it burn because they're worried about collapse.
Come in on
Of course, obviously, if there's life safety, they're going to go in, but this is something that people have to know about.
Right.
So one of the things that has happened is that if these buildings contain lightweight trusses, you have to have it up to code, and that has to include a sprinkler system, and that just simply adds to the cost of your home. So if you're building a new house and you're using lightweight construction, you've got to factor on several tens of thousands for
it's
a
another
sprinkler system
15,
to protect the
20,000.
truss.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then finally, your last hidden hazard for the house, stoves and television sets that tip over. So the new big flat screen TVs, if they're mounted to the wall, that's one thing. But if they're not mounted to the wall, they certainly can tip over and then obviously be a fire hazard. Stoves, we know as well, can get backed up if they're not kept up. What else about those are a concern to you?
Well, the biggest thing, obviously, and you pointed that, is the tip hazard. Generally, the wall is one of the safest places to put a TV. Parents can tell you they're very concerned about actually kids pulling over television. That is a big hazard. In fact, like 100 children have lost their life in the past 2.5 decades as a result of these flat screens. The other thing that we've also seen is these lightweight stoves that children can actually stand on, and they have fallen. In fact, Sears had a multi-million-dollar settlement because of injuries to kids because these stoves were so lightweight. These are not these big, giant cast iron stoves of 100 years ago. These are very, very light stoves that even if you set a
But Dan,
pot,
what are people doing letting their kids play on top of a stove?
Exactly.
Right?
Well, but
hello?
Yeah,
what is that?
But the thing is, it happens. Kids might just pull the oven door down to get up, and some of these stoves are such lightweight that you can actually tip them over if you put a pot on the oven door, or your kid stands on the oven door. They can tip. So that's why it's really important that whatever house you buy, make sure that the anti-tip brackets are in place, and make sure that they are solid enough, because I've heard some stories that even if you have anti-tip brackets, sometimes they can even break themselves. So
I can't even go there. As a mother of two boys, both of whom are very active, they were never allowed near the stove, and you shouldn't let them either. TVs are another matter. I could see that entirely. If you're an investor, though, I think the point here that Dan is trying to make is you've got to make sure that you are fully covered for accidents, for fire, with your insurance, and make sure that your renter, your tenant, is buying the correct form of insurance. You can state that in your lease, and you can then require them to show you the receipt that they're going to get from the insurance company to make sure that you and the tenant are protected. Dan Goldstein is the real estate reporter for Market Watch. Dan, so much fun. Thanks again for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching this episode of Big Money Real Estate. You can send me your real estate investing and personal finance questions on Twitter and Facebook. Check out my Intentional Investor series, How to Be Wildly Successful in Real Estate, on the Wit Nation store or at thinklinkstore.com. And be sure to share this video all around. Until next time, I'm Elise Glink.